Windows Event Log. The Windows Event Log has always been a useful tool to help us troubleshoot problems with a Windows computer. But it's also a cumbersome application to use as well. Not anymore. In Windows Vista, Microsoft have revamped the event log, and as such, it's now so much better to use than before, and it only bears a slight resemblance to the old clunky tool we used to use. Now, this new event viewer does do several things that the previous versions didn't do, and all for the better in my mind as well. Firstly, with the new event viewer, you have the ability to view events from several logs at the same time, so no more clicking back and forth between different logs in order to compare or view different events, and that's a real time saving. We can also create tasks which can automatically execute when a specific event is generated, and this can include running a program or script, sending an email, or producing a pop-up message. We can now create and save filters so that locating specific events is really easy, so no more searching through long logs anymore, and if you've ever had to do that before, you'll love this feature. And finally, we can even create subscriptions to other events on other computers and be notified when a specific event occurs on a totally different computer. So we'll click on Start, and if you've chosen to display your administrative tools on your Start menu here, you can select the Event Viewer right here. But if you haven't yet got around to putting your administrative tools here, you can go through the Control Panel. So we'll click Control Panel, we'll go to System and Maintenance, and then we'll scroll down and go to our administrative tools, and then we can launch the Event Viewer. Now, before we get started, I should point out that, as you can see here, when we launch the Event Viewer, even whilst logged on as an administrator, we are going to get our user account control message you've seen a lot of times throughout this series of videos. However, if you just log on as a regular standard user, you won't get this user account control message, and that might sound a little backward, but when you use the administrator account to access the Event Viewer, it requests elevated privileges so it can access the security log, whereas a standard user can view all the logs with the exception of the security log. Alright, well, we'll click Continue. And as you can see, that fires up the Event Viewer. Okay, so this is the new Event Viewer, which has changed in its appearance. We've got a new Actions pane over here on the right-hand side. And in the middle, we can see this Event Viewer now starts in an Overview and Summary mode, which enables us to see at a glance if any events of significance have occurred on this system. And if we scroll across here, it's going to show us these events over the last hour, 24 hours, and a week. So if we go and expand one of these, say we'll expand Warning, we'll get here a summary list of all the warning events that have come into our system. And we can see here that the list is sorted by event number, so if we simply just scroll down this list, you can see it's much shorter and more tidy than a full event log, and we can see all of the events of significance that have occurred. Now, if you want to look into an event further, you can either double click on it, or we could right click on it and choose to view all instances of this event. And this will take you directly to a filtered list that only shows these time service events in this case. Now, since I'm running my desktop here in 800 by 600 resolution, it's a little difficult to see the bottom part of this window here. But if we select an event in the top part, down the bottom, we can see the full details of the event. In fact, if we right-click on an event and choose Event Properties, we'll be able to see it here open in a new window, and it's a bit easier to see the same thing. So here we can see all of the details of the event, and it's basically the same as we would have seen in XP, for example. Now, if we use these arrow buttons here on the right-hand side of this event, we can move up and down between all of the events in the list, and we can even copy the contents of this event to the Windows clipboard if we like, and that way we can paste them into other applications for reporting or whatever you want to do with it. So if I just hit copy here and then click on Start, and we'll just type in Notepad, we can now paste it in here, and there's the output that you'd expect. Now also, by the way, if I go and cancel this event here, and let's right click on our event again, and choose copy, we can also perform the same copy function here as text as we just saw, but we can also copy this as a table, which doesn't do what you might think it should and copy the event in a nicely formatted table, something you could paste into a more sophisticated application like Word. Instead, it just gives you a summary. So what we'll do is we'll go and paste this into our Notepad application. And we'll just put a couple of carriage returns in here. And you can see what I mean. So there you can see copying as a table just gives us this output here, which is just a single line of text, but it does show the important stuff as you see it in the event viewer. Okay, so let's open up our event again. And on the Details tab, we now have the ability to view and export these details as XML, which we can then use to drop them into any application that's capable of understanding XML. Now we've got another view here called the Friendly View, which is simply the same data presented in a more readable format, and we can expand and collapse these details using these plus and minus symbols here at our leisure to show more or less details of the event. Now on the left-hand side of our console here, we can also look at an overview of the administrative events, and this will show all events, regardless of their severity level, that are related to administrative functions like shutdowns and application failures and so on. Now also notice that these two views that we've just looked at appear under the heading of Custom Views. Well, as the name suggests, we can also create our own custom views to only show events that we want to see. And this can be especially useful if, for example, you look after a specific application in your company. Say you're a DBA and you look after SQL Server, well, you can create a custom view to only show you SQL events. So over on the right-hand side here in our Actions menu, we can choose the second option here to create a custom view. And we can simply fill in this page to filter out everything else and just show the events that we want to see. Now, if we click on the XML tab, we could also write an XML query ourselves if we want, but just be sure that if you do choose to manually edit this query, you'll get a warning message telling you that you can no longer use the more friendly point-and-click style options on the Filter tab. Okay, so let's go back to the Filter tab and we'll create one. Now, I don't have a SQL Server on my computer here, so obviously using that as an example isn't a good choice for me, as we're not going to see any events. So let's use the time service since we've already seen that I do have events for that. Okay, so at the top, we can choose events that have been logged at any time, although we can change this to only show events from any of these time sources. Or we could use the custom option and create our own. Now next we can choose what severity we want to see events from. So if I was using my SQL Server example before, I'd probably want to see all events regardless of how severe they were. So let's just go and select them all here. But you can choose to only see the event severity that you like. Now the default here is to filter by which event log they're coming from, and in the drop-down list you can choose a specific log. Now note that we've got two folders here, Windows Logs, which contains the logs that you would expect to see, the application log, security log, and so on, as well as events that have been forwarded from other computers. Now in our application and services logs, if we expand that, you're going to see categories for other applications, and if we expand Microsoft and then Windows, you're going to see logs for services that are installed on this computer. But since it's possible that our events could come from multiple logs, so let's just assume that we're not sure where they're going to come from, we could change this to choose by source, and from our rather long drop-down list here, we can select a specific event source. Alright, so let's just scroll down a bit further and we'll try and locate our time service. So we'll place a check in that box, and we can choose more than one if we like. Now also notice that when we select this, it's also filled in the log as well, as it knows that the time service events will be found in the system log, and that's a nice touch. Now the default here is to filter all event IDs, so no matter what event ID is generated with our time service here, we're going to see them all, but you can choose to only see specific ones if you happen to know the ID that it's going to generate. Now, if you don't know the ID, it's easy enough to wait until you have a real event, grab the ID from it, come back in here, and then just change this filter. Now, we could also add in a task category as well. So if we set up a task, for example, to run a script when we get a time service event, our task will show up here, and then you can filter on that as well. Now, we could also filter on keywords, words that might be located within the event itself. And finally, we can choose to grab events from the time service that have been generated from a specific user or computer, or just leave the default here, which is all users and computers. Right, so we'll click on OK, and we'll need to give our new filter a name. And I'm just going to call this one Time Service. We can provide an optional description if we like. And if we are going to go ahead and create a lot of these, it's probably a good idea. And down the bottom here, we have the option of creating new folders to put them in, which can help you organize them better. And down the bottom here, this checkbox, All Users, which doesn't really tell you what it does, it's a little vague in its description. It simply means that all users on this computer are able to access this filter. So we'll click on OK, and there's our new filter, which, as you can see in the middle here, is now displaying only events that have been generated from the time service. And this is great, since no more do we have to wade through a ton of events to find out what we need. We can create a simple filter, or as many as you need, and go straight to the events you want to see. Now, if you do happen to move computers and you want to take these views with you, simply right-click on it, and you can choose to export the current view, and that'll save it as an XML file. And when you get on your new computer, we can simply come into here, right-click, and then choose to import it. And it's that simple. Okay, well, the other folders we have here in our event log is basically the same as you'd expect to see on other versions of Windows. If we expand this, you can see we've got the application log, security, but we also have this forwarded events, which is going to show us events that have been forwarded from other computers to ours here, and we'll see that in more detail a little later on in this video. Now, under Applications and Services logs, we can see logs for key applications, and of course, if we expand Microsoft and then Windows, we can see log files for the services on our computer as well, and we did see that earlier when we created our own custom filter. Now, the final option we have here at the bottom is subscriptions, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, on the right-hand side of our console, we've got a bunch of options that we can perform, and this list is context sensitive, so if we have an event in the middle here that we've selected, then we'll see additional actions we can perform on the event. So if we have a log file selected, then we'll see specific actions relating to log files. So selecting our application log here, for example, in the Actions pane, we could choose to open up a saved log if we've saved one. So let's do that. Let's just right-click on our application log, and we'll choose Save Events As. And that's going to default to my Documents folder, which is fine. So we'll just give this a name. I'm just going to call this one App, and we can save this log as either an event file or XML, text, and a CSV file as well that we could use to import into other applications such as Excel. All right, well, I'm going to leave the default here at an EVTX or event file and click Save. Now, when we click Save, we'll also be able to save other display information for additional languages if we like, which probably won't be necessary in most cases. But if you do want to import this log on another computer that is running a different language, then you could choose that language by clicking on the Other Radio button here, and then selecting to show all available languages, and then just choose the appropriate ones from the list. Now, I'm not going to bother with this because it's not necessary for me, so we'll just click on OK. Okay, now on the right hand side here we can choose to open a saved log and then navigate to the location where we have our logs stored. So we'll select that and click open, and this is going to create a new folder called saved logs and drop our application log into there, or we can go ahead and create a new folder if we like. Now we can also change the default name of app if we don't like this, so I can simply change this one to application log, and we'll click on new folder, and I'm just going to call this folder my logs, and we'll click on OK, and we'll let all users access this log and click on OK again. And there we can see our new log's been imported. Now another way of doing the same thing is to simply click on Start, and we could go to our Documents folder and we could double click on this file and we'll click Continue, and it will automatically load that into our console. But do be aware that you won't be able to change the name or choose a folder. It's simply going to go using the default name into the root of the saved logs folder. Now a little gotcha here. If you save a log to a new folder, as we did with our application log, I opened into the My Logs folder here. Once we close the event view and reopen it, it'll be gone. So to test it, just to make sure I'm not lying here, we'll click on Open Save Log, and we'll open App again, and we'll rename this one to App 1, and we'll save it to our My Logs folder here, and click on OK. Alright, and you can see it down here in the log. Now let's do it again. We'll click on Open Save Log, and we'll open App again. We'll click Open. This time we'll rename this one to App 2, and we'll save it here into the root of our logs, and we'll click on OK, and there we can see App 2. Alright, well let's go and close the event viewer, and we'll close this one as well. Now let's go back to our administrative tools and we'll rerun the event viewer and click Continue. Alright, now if we go and expand Save Logs, and we'll select the My Logs folder, you can see here that our original application log doesn't exist. Now, I'm not sure if this is a bug or by design, but be aware of it when you import your own saved logs. Any that you import into your own folder won't reappear. Any that you import into the root of the folder, they will still be there. So instead of calling your folder My Logs like I did, perhaps you should call it Temporary Logs, because they'll be gone once you close and reopen the event viewer. Okay, so if we select one of our application logs here, we're back to where we were before. So our next option on our action menu is to create a custom view, and we've seen that before, and we can also import custom views as well. Now if we do want to clear this log and start fresh, we can filter on the current log, and this is just a temporary filter that's used to sort the events in the list, and this works exactly in the same way as our custom filter, except this option isn't persistent like our custom filters are. Alright, now if we check out the properties of a log, you'll see that pretty much nothing's changed here since previous versions of Windows. Although since we're actually looking at a filtered log here, let's go back and expand this and look at one of our other logs. So we'll select Properties. Okay, in here you can see that we can still resize the log, of course, like we could in previous versions of Windows, but it's probably still better to do this using group policy, unless of course it's only this machine that you want to resize the log on. But if you're running a monitoring system like MOM, which takes advantage of event logs, then yeah, you'll want to increase the size of your logs here. But again, group policy would be the better option. Now we can also click on the Subscriptions tab, which is new, and we'll talk more about subscriptions later on in this video. Now next we could use the Find option to locate items in our log, and this is going to support searching the entire event, so you could simply enter in an event ID here or a source or whatever you like. Just be aware that it won't return a list of events. It's going to simply just move to the next item in the log. So if I did a search for perflib here, and we'll click Find Next, you can see it's just moving to the next item in the list. Now we can also save events if we like, and we've already seen that in action. Now once you've got an actual event selected, down in the bottom part of our action menu, we've got additional actions that we could use that relate specifically to events themselves. Now all of these options are also available if we right click on an event as well, so you can do it either way, it doesn't really matter. So we could check out the event properties, which is the same as double clicking on an event to check out the details, and we could attach a task to this event. Now this is a cool feature, and it lends itself to further automating your computer when trouble rears its ugly head. So let's try it out. So I'm going to quickly go and stop one of my services from running. So we'll click on Start, and we'll type service and hit enter, and then we'll click Continue. And we'll choose to stop one of our services. Let's say the Windows search service. So we'll select that and choose to stop it. All right, it's stopped, so now let's start it up again. Okay, it's started, so let's go back to our event viewer, and we'll choose our application log, and we'll hit F5 to refresh it. And at the top here, or rather it should be the second from top, we can see an event that our Windows search service has stopped. Okay, so let's right click on this event, and now we'll choose to attach a task to this event, which will open up a basic task wizard with the name of the event already populated, which is simply the source and the ID of the event joined together, but you can change it if you like. And I will, because quite frankly, I don't like this name. So I'm going to call mine Windows Search Service Stopped. And we can also enter in an optional description if we like. I'm going to leave that blank, and we'll click Next. Okay, well now we can see the fields here have been populated for us with the details of our log. So we can see this event came in the application log, the source was Windows Search, and the event ID. So there's nothing here for us to do except to click Next. And now we can specify what we want to do when this event occurs. So we could start a program, we could send an email, or display a message. Now since I'd like to see some automation in my life, we'll choose the top one. But if we click Email first and then choose Next, you can see that choosing this option is pretty self-explanatory. Just fill in the fields here along with your email server at the bottom and any attachments that you wish to add. Now if you do choose the third option to display a message, then you'll only need to enter in a title for the message and the message itself, and you'll expect a pop-up message when this event occurs. Okay, so let's choose the top option to start a program, and we'll click Next. And in the program script field, you can either browse directly to the location where you have a program or script, or just type it in directly. Now you can also add in any arguments the command or script may have as well, and you can choose where the command should start from. Now by the way, a little gotcha here. If you have a script or command that you wish to run that contains a space, you'll have to enter it enclosed in quotes or it won't work. So for example, if we were to type in a path of, say, C program files, and that of course contains a space, and let's say we're going to run a script called myscript.vbs, if we leave it as the way it is and click Next, you can see that the task is actually going to run a command C program with the argument of files myscript.vbs, and that won't work. So we'll click Cancel, and if we then choose to enclose this command in quotes, it will run just fine. So be aware of that for when you write your own scripts. Alright, now a quick and simple way of restarting my Windows search service when it stops would be to issue the net start command. And sure, I could write a script, but since I can't be bothered, I'm going to simply cheat and enter in the command directly here. So for our program, I'm simply going to enter in the word net. And in the arguments section, I'm simply going to type in start wsearch, and then we'll click Next, and we're done. Now we can look at the properties for this event if we like, and I'll check that box, and then we'll click Finish. Okay, now on the properties of our task, we can provide further information. We could enter in a description or edit the existing one had we have entered one, of course. We can see the task here is going to run with my credentials here since I created it, but we could also use another user or group if we want to change this. Now the default here is to only run this task when I'm logged on, but we can choose to run it whether I'm logged on or not. Now if you do want to run this task under your own user account, whether you're logged on or not, and you choose this box here not to store your password, then the task will only have access to local computer resources. So depending on what your actual task is, for example, if you have a script which does something on a remote computer, then if you check this box, that script won't work. Now we can also choose to run this task with the highest privileges, which for security reasons we probably won't want to do this, as it could present a good target for hackers, but the option is there if the script you need to run requires a high level of access. Now finally, we can make this task hidden and configure it for specific operating systems, but since this is a new feature, this is obviously only supported at this stage for Windows Vista. Now on the Triggers tab, we can see that the trigger for this task to execute is the Windows Search event hitting our event log, but we can add in a new trigger if we like, and we can edit or delete this one. Now in the Actions tab, simply shows our task that we're going to run, which is our net start command, and we can add in another one, so let's click New. And let's say under our action here, we want to display a pop-up message. So we can enter in a title for our message, so I'm just going to say, Wake Up. And for the message itself, I'm just going to say that our search service has stopped. Alright, well, we'll click on OK. And now we've got two tasks that are going to execute when this event is triggered. And we can reorder these tasks if we like, so if I wanted my pop-up message to appear first, we'll click this little arrow icon here. And now our pop-up message will appear before our net start command executes. Alright, so we'll click the next tab, which is the Conditions tab. And here we can specify some rather cool conditions that our computer will need to meet to execute our task. Now by default, these tasks will only execute if our computer is plugged into the wall, and it will stop if it switches over to battery power, which is useful for notebooks, but we can change this if we like. Now we could also wake up our computer to run this task if it is shut down, although when you think about it, as cool as this feature is, chances are we won't be receiving an event anyway if the computer's off. But that said, this is also a feature of the new improved task scheduler, which we'll look at in another video, where you can configure your computer to wake up and run tasks like backups or defrags or something else useful. Now at the top here, we can choose to only start the task if the computer is idle, and to stop it if the computer ceases to be idle. And we can also resume the task again if the computer then goes back into an idle state. Now finally, we could also choose to start this task only if a specific network connection is available, which is certainly useful for remote tasks, as there isn't much point in running a script that targets a remote computer if you can't connect to it. Now the next tab we have is the Settings tab, which allows us to run this task on demand, or whenever we want to manually kick it off. Now we could also force our task to run if for some reason our scheduled start is missed. That is, if we are scheduling this task to run every hour for argument's sake. Now if the task fails, we can choose to restart it, and we can also stop it if the task takes longer to complete than a value specified here. Now if the task doesn't end before the value specified here ends, then by default our task will be forced to stop, and of course you can turn that off if you like. Now if this was a scheduled task and we haven't scheduled to run it again, after however many days we specified here, we can choose to delete it. Now finally at the bottom here, we could choose what to do if the task is already running and it's triggered again. Now the default here is to not start another task, but we can start another one in parallel, meaning our new task is going to run at the same time as the old one, or we could queue up a new instance which will only execute the task once our first task has completed, or we could stop the existing one and this new task would replace it. Okay, well, the last tab we have is the History tab, and here we'll simply see a history of what's occurred with this task. And you can see at the top here, the only entry that we have is the fact that we've just created this task. Now, once it's run, you're going to see an entry in here for that as well. All right, well, we'll click on OK, and we'll need to enter in our password for this task. So I'm going to enter in my password, and we'll click on OK, and our task creation is complete. Now, even though that might seem a little long-winded, in most cases you probably won't need to run through all of these options, as the defaults will likely be okay, but I just wanted to point out what you can do with these tasks. So later on, you can come in here and make your own decisions. Alright, our task is done, and we can now modify this task if we like from the task scheduler, not from within Windows Event Viewer. So if we click on the Start button and type in task, we'll launch the task scheduler, and we'll click on Continue. So if we expand our task scheduler library and then select Event Viewer Tasks, in the middle here, there's our new task, and if we right click on it, we could choose to run it manually, we could end it if it is running, disable it, of course we could delete it and edit its properties and so on. Alright, well, let's go and trigger our event. We'll go back to our services MMC, and I'm going to stop the Windows search service. Okay, it's stopped, and we've now got our pop-up message here telling us that the Windows search service has stopped. So we'll click OK, and you can see by that little flash of the command prompt, there was our task restarting the Windows search service. So if I hit refresh here in our services MMC, okay, and there you can see our service is back up again. Now this is great, since we really don't have to do anything. Our PC can sort of service itself, on the presumption, of course, that we know what events we need to be looking for. Okay, well, let's go back to our event viewer, because the last thing we want to look at here is this new subscriptions feature. But before we do that, I'm going to have to add this machine to a domain, since this feature is really only likely to be used in a domain environment, and since I don't have any other machines currently in this work group, it makes more sense if I add this Vista machine to a domain first. Okay, well, I've just joined this Vista computer to a domain, and I've now fired up the event viewer, so we're back at the same spot we were before. Now, if we go here and click on subscriptions, if this is a new computer, firstly, you're going to get a pop-up message that's going to ask you if you want to use this feature and start the event collector service. Now, we did see that message pop up earlier in this video, and I clicked on yes, but if you've accidentally clicked on no, you're going to need this event collector service to be running. So to verify that, we'll click on Start, we'll type in Services and hit Enter. And if we scroll down towards the bottom here, you'll see here the Windows Event Collector Service, and it is started. If it's not, just start it up. Okay, now before we actually start creating these subscriptions here, I should point out that in order for this to work, the machine that you're gathering events from needs to support the web services for management transport, and to the best of my knowledge at this time, the only Windows operating systems that support this are Windows 2003 Server R2, Vista, and the upcoming Windows 2008 Server. So before we can even get this feature here to work, we will need to configure a listener on the target machine, the one that we're going to be gathering the events from. Okay, so I've just logged on to a beta Longhorn test server here, so I'm going to go and fire up a command prompt, and we'll type in winrm and then quick config. And what this will do is this will create a listener on this server so that any IP address can contact it, and it will automatically create a firewall exception to allow this request in. Okay, so do we want to make these changes, yes or no? Of course we do. And we can see it's now been updated for remote management. Now, obviously, there's more to this command than this quick config we just typed in here. So either on Longhorn, if you have it, or Windows Vista, if you simply type in WinRM with a dash question mark, you can see all of the available options you have if that at all interests you. And we'll more than likely cover this command in more detail in its own video when Windows Server 2008 finally comes out. Okay, well that's all we need to do here, so we'll go back to our Vista machine. Alright, well we've just switched back to our Vista computer here, so now if we go and right click on our subscriptions folder, we can choose to create a subscription, and we can now configure a rule to go and fetch events from other computers. So since the only other computer that's actually switched on in my network here at the moment is that Longhorn test server, we'll use that one. Okay, so let's set this up to start collecting events indicating that a service has started on the Longhorn server. So we'll need to give this one a name, so I'm just going to call this one 7036 events. And since the descriptional, of course, is optional, I'm going to leave it blank. Alright, well next here we can choose where we want to store the events we gather from the remote computer. And I'm just going to leave this here defaulting to forwarded events, but you can choose from any other logs that you have here in this list. Now we'll need to define where the events we want to collect are coming from. So we'll click Add, and then we'll click the Advanced button, and we'll click Find Now. And then we can select the computer that we want to gather events from. Now in my case, it's going to be this one here, our Longhorn beta server. So we'll select that, we'll click OK, and OK again. Okay, so what events do we want to collect from the remote computer? Well, if we select this little drop-down arrow here, we can either copy from an existing custom view, or we could choose Edit, or click the bigger button here, and we can simply start with a blank filter. So we'll choose Edit, and we've seen this before, so we'll run through this quickly. I'm going to leave the default here at any time, and we'll grab, say, Informational Events. And from our drop-down box here, we'll choose to grab events from, say, our system log, and we'll choose to match the event ID of 7036, and we'll leave the rest of the defaults as they are to match any user and computer. Alright, well we'll click on OK, and if we click on the Advanced button, we can specify a machine account or a specific user account that we'll use to go and access the remote log. So I'm going to choose a specific user, and we'll click on the user and password button here, and I'll need to enter in the password for my account, and we'll click OK. And down the bottom here, we can change the delivery optimization for our forwarded events from the default of normal to minimize bandwidth or minimize latency. And down the bottom here, we can choose from HTTP or HTTPS. Well, I'm going to leave these defaults as they are, and we'll click on OK. And we'll click OK again. And our subscription will immediately try and contact the target computer to see if it has any events for us. So once events start trickling here into our Vista machine, they'll be located here in our forwarded events log. And if we click on our system log here, you can see here that indeed our subscription of these events has been successfully activated on our target machine here. So if you want to verify that the target machine did in fact receive our request to forward its events to us, you can see that right here. And this is a great feature since now I don't have to go logging on to different computers to find out what's going on. I can set this up once for multiple computers if I like, and not even leave the one folder, and they'll all be delivered straight here into our forwarded events log. And there you go, as we're just talking about it, there is an event that's just appeared. So if we double click on this event, you can see that it did in fact come from our remote server. Okay, in this video, we've looked at the new event viewer in Windows Vista, with its custom filters, ability to automatically execute tasks, remote event management, and new exporting functions, it's far superior to anything we've used on previous versions of Windows. And if you're one of the lucky, or rather unlucky people that has had to sit down and sift through hundreds if not thousands of events in the past, you'll no doubt be excited by these changes that Microsoft have made. So rather than shying away from the event viewer, you've got no excuse to not go and take a look, as Microsoft have made navigating through and extracting events from your local computer as well as remote computers really easy.